Thursday, like the 12th or something like that. There it is. And we're live Thursday, February 12th. Oh, in the 1 o'clock-ish time frame. And our good old friend Patrick Murphy is here. We're going to be talking about, well, electric, I know we're mileage-based user fees to start. We always think it's one of those areas for sure. But it's good to see you, and I hope things are well. And we have a lot to cover. So without further ado, welcome back to committee. And I guess you'll take us from there and introduce us to all our new witnesses and guests.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director for the Agency of Transportation. The last time we spoke was on Zoom, and I did promise that you'd have a rate setting proposal from UVM TRC, and that I'd be here in person. And so here I am, and at least you got one of the things that you wanted. So with the committee discussion that happened in the spring of last year in both the House and the Senate, and we thought it'd be good to make sure that you had an up-to-date rate setting proposal, that it would be done by an independent party, and that we'd survey, sort of all of the other states who have done it, and make sure that you all had a reasonable and fair approach that could be easily explained to the public. And so we, through a competitive solicitation, we selected the UVM Transportation Research Center, which has deep experience in this particular area. And so we were lucky to get a good bit of work based on prior experience, particularly with Vermont data sets. So this is really informed by a deep analysis of the registration data and the odometer reading data that we do have. And I think it does come to a fair approach. It's different than what we had originally proposed back in 2024. Similar methodology, but coming to it a little bit differently, and they can get into those differences during the testimony. So this time is really for UVM to kind of explain how they got to where they did, and then have you all be given the opportunity to ask questions and, if need be, seek additional kind of analysis. So with that, I'll invite, sure.
Sorry, just a quick question. This process, we had some federal grants to help us develop the mileage-based user fee. Is that correct?
That's right. So this is a part of that grant work. We also asked, because in the legislation last year, it sort of identified this as an interim step towards a mileage-based user fee for all vehicles. And so we've asked, beyond just kind of developing a rate setting methodology, that you all have some sense of what the impacts are to households across Vermont, not just for battery electric vehicle owners, but if you were to move in the direction of all vehicles in the future, what that would look like by household and geography demographics.
Yeah, but just to make sure, because I think when you mentioned, well, it could be applied to all vehicles, some people in this committee had never even heard of that. But just to make sure, I mean, we're committed to moving down with a mileage-based user fee for electric vehicles.
That's right.
And that this could be standing alone. But what you're saying is the process that you develop, if the legislature would like to move it further, the two could line up. Is that?
That's right. So the analysis that was done was to make sure that this rate setting could stand up not just to our current moment, but into the future if changes were decided by the legislature to move in that direction. So I think, we should probably just dive into that. And then if there are questions, by all means, we can follow up through the testimony.
Was there any talk about the fairness of it when you drive out of state?
Sure. So those are all kinds of considerations that went into both the design of the program and how the rate has been designed. You know, there's obviously challenges, and I think we spoke to this in my last testimony about there are trade-offs. So those states that have piloted programs that allow for more technology-heavy methods of reporting, which allowed you to geofence where the miles are being recorded. Those states, unfortunately, have not seen the sort of payback return that you would hope for, because they have very high administrative costs. Virginia's up to 40%, Utah and Oregon are quite high, and so they're having trouble enrolling enough people, enough volume to even make it generate the revenue that you would expect. Which is, so the legislation last year called for setting a rate that is approximately equivalent to what a gas vehicle is paying. In those other scenarios, when you have a technology-heavy solution that requires not only more upfront costs, but ongoing administrative costs, you're not actually realizing net revenue that is equivalent to what you would be raising from those other average gas vehicles. So it's not a perfect solution that we're talking about right now. But to your point, Representative Pouch, we are beginning with electric vehicles to make sure that those kinds of things are worked out first before there's any kind of discussion about moving to the rest of the fleet. Because the fairest thing right now for electric vehicles up until January of this past year had not paid anything for a usage tax. The fairest thing is to move them in the direction of paying something roughly equivalent. But there are certainly other things that need to be worked out over time, and that's a part of the work that we have for this grant and the proposal.
So but I'm concerned about the gas end of it. So if I drive out of state, say we're a few years down the road and we're doing it with gas. So I'm going to drive out of state. I'm going to pay miles. I'm going to pay for those miles I used out of state to Vermont. And then I'm also going to pay gas tax when I pull up to the pump in another state.
No, that's not what's being proposed. We're
You're
proposing.
proposing electric. I know you're proposing
That's
electric,
right.
but I hear everybody talking about going to gas in the future.
Well, that would have to be contingent upon figuring out all of these other issues that would otherwise be barriers to the expansion towards the rest of the fleet, which include not just, out-of-state drivers, but also those that live on the border and travel the majority of their miles out of state. So we're not there. And that's maybe a discussion to be had, a year or 2 years from now, but we're just not there right now.
So,
Well, I was just saying, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, to get to Representative Case's point, I think the sort of the confusion is a little bit, is the language that was passed in last year's bill referencing gas vehicles, that was intent language. So that doesn't really mean anything. That's just like a goal, it has no legal bearing. If we were to go down that road, correct, we would need actual law to do that. So that was just changed, sort of like, this is what we'd like to do, is that correct?
That's right. So what we're going to be asking for this session is statutory language that implements a program for electric vehicles only. What the legislature decides beyond that is obviously up to you all and your colleagues.
and in that conference committee, that language was discussed rather heavily. And the vote of including it or not including it was extremely close.
I think we were on yours.
We lost. So what we're going to do right now, and I apologize, I'm going to step out for a moment, but what we have to do right now is we have to receive the presentation of what the work was done to establish a mileage-based user fee for electric vehicles.
That's right.
And we're gonna,
And the rate, so,
Yes, so what you'll receive is a rate, how they got to the rate, and then other considerations. And so the hope is that we have some sense of the committee about whether we want to move in this direction, because then we'll incorporate that language into statutory framework that we'll propose back to you all within the next week or so.
and in a little bit change of our normal custom, we're gonna try to hold our questions till we make sure we get through the presentation and the information, and then normally we get dug into questions while it's going on, but I will want to make sure that we get through it. So we're gonna go from there. We'll switch, or you'll go from there, and I'll be right back. Please don't wait for me though.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So for the record, my name's Claire Nelson. I'm a research analyst at the University of Vermont Transportation Research Center. I think a lot of questions that were just being brought up, we are well prepared to address in our presentation. So that was a good lead-in.
And yeah, I'm Dr. Greg Rongold. I'm the director of the Transportation Research Center at UVM and also faculty in civil environmental engineering.
For a little bit of background context, we have done a lot of research into transportation funding and mileage fees in the past. We've written multiple papers on this topic, given national webinars on this topic. We've done extensive reviews of how other states are dealing with mileage fees. So if there's questions beyond what we're presenting today, we have a variety of research that might be able to draw upon some of the questions you have that include mileage fee equity, mileage fees in rural areas, public acceptance and outreach about mileage fees, kind of marketing around those ideas, how the public responds and feels about increases in costs relative to where those costs would go towards in public funding. So,
Yeah, and I actually, Claire did a lot of the work, but I was here and presented some of that work, I think, last session.
And if there are like clarifying questions throughout the presentation, I welcome you to interrupt so that we can all move forward through the slides together instead of leaving anyone behind. Great. So to set the stage a bit, I think everyone in this committee is probably well aware of the declining revenue problem with the current taxes. So this graph here is showing you on the y-axis the current revenue from the gas tax, the diesel tax, and then those flat infrastructure fees, the BEV registration fee and the PHEV registration fee. This graph might be a little bit steeper as a decline than what you might have seen in the past. That's because we're adjusting it to 2023 dollars. So not only is it decline in revenue, it's also the decline in the purchasing power. So you can see in 2040, for example, it's going to be much lower purchasing power in addition to revenue. The reason why we're seeing this decline over time is for a variety of reasons that you're probably well aware of. There's more fuel efficient vehicles, so even the gas and diesel vehicles on the road are generating less revenue per mile, in addition to more electric vehicles that just aren't consuming any gasoline on the roads. And then the effect of inflation, which is that lowering of the purchasing power over time. So these are kind of two effects here. We have the decline in gasoline consumption and then the decline in purchasing power due to inflation.
And just one other.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, this is also just light duty vehicle.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
yeah. So, this is good to add in the inflation factor because we know our gas taxes don't have an inflationary piece to it. And
We're going to talk.
it's difficult to raise, we'll just say that. Are there any states out there that tie their fuel taxes to an inflationary rate?
Yeah. So I know California, Florida, Delaware. We have a list of them in the report that we've provided. In addition to, there's a list in the policy brief. If you look on the back page at the bottom section, there's like a mileage fee impact state revenue section in there. It has a list of the other states that have indexed their gas taxes to inflation.
So if you index the gas tax, it will probably still be steep. It'll still come down. Oh, that's the amount.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
go.
All right.
Great job segueing. You're doing the work for me.
Yeah.
So these are revenue projections that we've done. If you have any questions about how we projected the revenue, happy to answer them. But we see that even if we adjust the gas tax for inflation, while we see less of a decline, we still see that there's,
Thank you.
this effect of reduction in total amount of gallons of fuel that are being purchased. So it's a combined effect, replacing the gas tax with the gas tax index to inflation only solves part of the funding problem that we're facing. I'm gonna let us digest this for a second because I just got that.
And just one other, while we're on this slide too, one other thing to think about is like, we don't normally have to adjust for inflation, other types of common taxes and fees like sales tax and income tax, because those essentially self-adjust for inflation, right? Prices and wages go up, that is inflation, so those type of taxes capture that, but when you have a per unit of thing sort of tax, like a gasoline excise tax, then if that's not built in, and so ideally it should be, or you lose money every year since you adjust it, and you don't want to be back there adjusting it.
So obviously, the state has recognized this issue. We just wanted to kind of lead with the idea that inflation is also part of this problem. But this is the language from the intent that you guys were talking about earlier, that the state set to use a mileage fee to help cover some of this revenue loss for BEVs. So the intent language, just a refresher here. So the state is hoping to use a mileage-based user fee for BEV pleasure cars. The intent is that this mileage-based user fee will be approximately equivalent to what current gas and diesel vehicles are paying, and that this will serve kind of a pilot for an interim step towards gradually expanding this to a statewide program, pending all of the issues that need to be worked out that you were bringing up earlier. So just some interpretation here. Pleasure car is kind of a funny term. We interpret that as any light duty vehicles in the state. So vehicles where the gross vehicle weight is less than 10,000 pounds. We're also going to share some analysis that we've done looking at expanding this to a statewide program. And in that case, we also interpret a statewide light duty vehicle mileage fee. We don't do any analysis related to medium or heavy duty vehicles. They are used very differently for very different purposes, and they're, to put it bluntly, a whole nother beast. So that is not within the scope of what we've done, but if that's of interest, we can chat about that too. So what we've done for the Vermont legislation with the Agency of Transportation, we've reviewed how other states are setting their mileage fees. We've looked at the recommendations that the legislature has received previously about mileage fees, and then update those recommendations. So today we're going to be sharing with you what we recommend in addition to how that differs and why that differs from suggestions you've gotten in the past. And we are going to be focusing mostly on what our updated recommendations are, in addition to what the impact would be on both Vermont household costs and state revenue generating potential. So that's what we're about to go through. So the actual fee that we're recommending for BEV pleasure cars in Vermont, which are just light duty vehicles, is a 1.4 cents per mile fee. This fee was set to be approximately equivalent, this blue box up here, approximately equivalent to what current gas and diesel vehicle owners pay in motor fuel taxes. And we calculated that using the state gas tax, which is dollars per gallon, divided by the average fuel economy. So dollars per gallon divided by miles per gallon gives you dollars per mile. So that's how we calculated this mileage fee here. There's a couple of key factors that go into this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we can dive deeper if there's additional interest. For the state gas tax, we used a 5-year average. Obviously, the gas tax has that percent that's based on the retail price of gasoline in it. So to avoid any short-term fluctuations in market gas prices, we figured the safest route was to take a multi-year average of the gas tax to kind of smooth those trends in gasoline prices. So we use a 5-year average here. And then we get our average fuel economy for the state of Vermont for light duty vehicles from our Vermont registration and inspection records. So we took all of the light duty vehicles that consume gas or diesel in the state of Vermont and used a distance weighted harmonic average, jargony words for basically we want to account for the fact that not only does a vehicle have a fuel economy, but those fuel economies are used differently on the roads based on how you're driving and relates to how much fuel you're consuming. So we weight the average by how far vehicles have traveled to account for those real like differences in how vehicles are used. So those distances come from the same method that we would use to charge the mileage fee, which are the odometer readings from the vehicle inspections. So all of this is state-specific data. Yeah.
So, this is something I've been waiting for to just sort of see. So there really isn't, I mean, you're looking at like the average car and not, so that could be a truck
Yes.
and a Prius C. And, what you're saying is a battery electric car is in the middle. It's
no.
not less efficient or more
We're
efficient.
gonna get there.
Yeah.
But I think the point here that we're trying to make is just, because the next slide's like comparing to the prior report, but is that we're using a multi-year average because the state has that little formula that lets it vary a little bit with the price. And then rather than just looking at all the vehicles in the registration record, we cross-reference them with an EPA database to get their fuel economies. So as a straight up average, we account for the fact that some of those cars are barely used and some are used a lot. So that's the weighted fuel economy. So if you have a Prius and it sits in a driveway, it's not gonna influence this average too much. If you have a car you drive a lot, it will be more weighted in here. And we do that so that this fee we're recommending, the 1.4 cents, is as close as possible to the average per mile cost that people with gas or diesel cars are currently paying.
Because I
It's
think
a little
your
different.
question is kind of getting to the purpose of a mileage fee generally. And here, like he said, we're just trying to make an equivalence to what a gas or diesel vehicle would pay per mile and apply that to BEVs.
We've got tables, plots, and maps coming,
Yeah.
so you'll see all the curves.
So this approach differs, it's similar methodology, but differs a bit from what the 2024 legislative report recommended. That's on the left here. They recommended a slightly higher rate per mile, 1.8 cents per mile. Ours is 1.4. Couple of reasons for that difference. The first one is that they use just the most recent state gas tax. As I explained, we want to kind of smooth the trend in differences in gas tax prices. So we used a 5-year average. We also use more recent data. So they had originally used data from 2013 to calculate the average fuel economy of light duty vehicles in the state of Vermont. We used the most recent data because, you can imagine in this equation here, the 2013 average fuel economy for vehicles was about 19 miles per gallon. Now it's 23. So fuel efficiency has increased a lot since 2013. If you used 19 miles per gallon, this mileage fee increases, right? So the average amount that people with gas or diesel vehicles are paying per year would be lower than what you would be charging BEVs now per mile. And if you have any questions on that, I can also elaborate. Yeah.
You guys drive electric cars?
I drove my big internal combustion engine car today, but I have an electric one also.
Good.
So
You?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're using more recent data to make sure that when you implement a mileage fee for BEVs, it's not going to be much more per year than gas or diesel vehicles are paying. Any additional, basically, consequences for EV owners. There's just a couple of methodological differences with the way that we calculate our average based on the best recommendations that are currently out there for how to calculate averages for rates that were not necessarily accounted for in the last report. And some of the bigger differences are the differences in rate adjustments that we recommend in our report. So previously, they had recommended increasing this per mile fee to cover the additional administrative costs. Obviously, a mileage fee program is going to cost something to administer, both as startup and then in ongoing costs moving forward. they had recommended increasing the per mile rate. We recommend increasing per vehicle fees. We feel that the cost of administering this program is much more likely to vary with the number of vehicles registered in a program than how many miles any individual vehicle travels within that program. So a vehicle that travels 5,000 miles a year versus 50,000 miles a year is going to cost the same amount to administer. You just need to check and charge their mileage rate. So in charging an administrative fee based on the number of miles that the car is traveling, we feel is not necessarily reflective of how the administrative costs would actually be incurred. So we recommend an alternative of potentially increasing the vehicle registration fee for vehicles in the mileage fee program, or the inspection fee where they're actually getting their odometer reading checked, or some alternative that the legislature comes up with. But biggest point being, we don't recommend adjusting the actual mileage fee rate to cover administrative costs for the reasons I just mentioned.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Do we have an additional registration fee right now for EVs?
Yes.
We do. So you're
$89 per vehicle. So the
on
mileage,
top of the regular registration fee?
yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the regular
will that
registration fee.
Stay there?
This is a
This is a
requested
new,
replacement.
Oh,
Yes,
and
so
move. So, but you will still have, so your recommendation is if I'm paying and I have a gas, or vehicle, I'm paying $93 a year. An electric vehicle would pay more for the registration of the vehicle. And
potentially.
that's what you're recommending.
We're recommending replacing that infrastructure fee of $89 per vehicle that BEVs currently pay. We're recommending replacing that flat fee with a mileage fee of 1.4 cents per mile.
Okay.
And then in a small additional cost
To
to
the
cover the
registration.
administration.
Of the, we're paying $93. That, their
So-
fee would go up.
Maybe it's 94. I don't, we didn't,
Okay,
work. We,
okay.
outside of our scope to figure out how
Okay,
much
so you
the
didn't-
costs are,
okay.
but
Okay, but I
that's
just
the
wanted
idea.
to try to figure out.
the concept is, yeah, the
Okay.
cost is every time you have to go register and calculate the mileage fee, that's where the administrative cost comes from. It doesn't come from the fact of you drive your car a lot or
Correct.
right?
Okay, thank you.
The other major rate adjustment that we recommend is about inflation. So the prior report, the 2024 report, does not really make any strong recommendations about inflation. They don't say much about it. We highly recommend indexing the mileage fee to inflation for a couple of reasons that we'll get into, in some revenue thoughts that we have later on showing our projected revenue from the mileage fee.
What are your thoughts on driving out of state? What did you guys come up with when you drive out of state as far as, say I live, White River and I have a job over in Concord, New Hampshire?
Yeah, I mean, because there's really no other states are doing much with EV charging on a per mile or per kilowatt hour basis, we don't see any problem with an EV program.
I think the
Yeah,
question's
drive it,
about
right?
if you drive out of the state, you're paying the mileage fee in
Oh,
this
yeah.
case, because it's based on an odometer. And then you're paying the gas
That's
tax
a-
also outside some states. So we haven't got into the details on your in-state, and you drive out of state and you're being double charged. Is what you're
I
talking
don't
about.
know if you're being double charged,
well,
it's the
for
idea
whatever
of being
portion,
charged for something you're not driving on.
No, exactly.
This
It's sort of,
program is made to help take care of Vermont roads.
Yeah.
And so it's not fair if you drive over to another state and you're paying a fee. Yeah, I guess it's good for Vermont, but it's not good for the driver.
so
You know,
there's,
he's paying for something that's
there,
not fair.
there are some different, like, there's the technology options that Patrick talked about. There are other options that are simpler of being reimbursed for your estimated gas tax payments out of state. We're going to talk about, we have at the end of this, and we can do more after if we get to this, but we have some recommendations how to at least capture revenue from the out-of-state drivers that are in Vermont that wouldn't be paying the gas tax with the mileage fee,
Still,
which is
if I'm the
another.
guy driving the car, I don't care about what everybody else is doing driving in here. I care about that I'm paying for a tax when I'm driving out of state that's meant to take care of Vermont roads.
Yeah. I mean,
It's not fair. I don't know.
If
care how you
this is
say
a
it.
big concern of everyone in the committee, we are on retainer to do additional analysis. So if this is something that is a pressing matter to everyone, we'd be happy to, and we can run
Yeah,
our.
talk to Patrick,
Yeah.
who's in charge of the contract, but yeah, we, we can do a deeper dive into, there are a range of options.
Yeah.
To deal with these sort of things.
Yeah.
The focus today, though, has been on setting the rate in state and what the equity, rural, urban, different types of vehicles and households looks like. And so you're not gonna see a bunch in your particular question.
I mean, it's in the western part of the state, so I have New York drivers that come into Vermont to fill up with gas because our gas is cheaper than New York State. Similarly, those who live on the eastern part of the state, I'm sure go over to Hinsdale or wherever to get cheaper gas, but they're driving in the state. So I think it.
We do talk, oh, yeah.
I mean, in the end, I mean, it's like if you're. You see what I'm trying to.
I do, yeah, I think
Yeah,
in terms
okay.
of total state revenue, but to your point, the individual drivers are
Correct.
then not knowing where they're driving. We do have some thoughts on out-of-state drivers coming into Vermont at the end of this presentation we can get into. So kind of just in summation of what I've just been talking about, we recommend this 1.4 cent per mile fee. This type of equation that we're using here is used in 3 different states' active mileage fee programs, in addition to over 10 different states' proposals for mileage fees. It's a very commonly used way to calculate a mileage fee equivalence. So we feel it's defensible from that standpoint and from the ways that we've adjusted it to be specific to Vermont. What 3 states? They're in our report. So Utah uses a very similar measure to this, Oregon and I'm trying to remember the last one. Anyway, so we ultimately we recommend indexing this mileage fee to inflation, as well as using a type of per vehicle fee to cover that administrative cost as opposed to a per mile fee. What this means for actual revenue in the state of Vermont, we've done some revenue projections. Just quick overview of how we got these. We used EPA's MOVES model, which accounts for vehicle fleet turnover, fuel economy projections, mileage projections of vehicles. And these are county specific so they're actually representative of Vermont's data that we've summed across the state. The state of Vermont last provided data for this model in 2022. So it's relatively recent state provided data. So we calculated how much revenue the state could expect to bring in using, our current system of gas taxes, diesel taxes, and these flat BEV and PHEV fees. That's this blue line at the bottom here. So that's what I showed on the first slide. All of the dashed lines are if we indexed our fees to inflation. So I think I showed this blue line and that dashed blue line earlier to show if we adjusted our gas tax and our diesel tax to inflation. We also projected in the yellow line if we were to apply a mileage fee for just battery electric vehicles. So the yellow line here is mileage fee for battery electric vehicles. Dashed yellow line is if we index that fee to inflation. And then finally, the pink line is if we were to apply a mileage fee to all light duty vehicles in the state, because remember, we're just focusing on light duty vehicles for this analysis. You can see some trends here. For one, oh yeah.
Just to clarify, for the line with mileage fee for BEV indexed, does that also include indexing the gas and diesel tax, or is that still not adjusted for inflation?
Yes, so that includes all of the fees there would be indexed.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, I mean, if you index one, not the other, the difference in what people are paying per mile would be way.
Right, okay, thanks, that's what I was.
Yeah. Yeah, and if that's of interest, again, we could draft up something that just shows if you were to index it. And not the.
Well, it seems much more fair the other way, so I just wanted to make sure it was clear that
Yeah.
that was the case, thanks.
So yeah, a couple of things are going on in this plot. For one, even if you indexed the gas tax to inflation and did not, gas tax being a generalized term for all of our current vehicle fees that we're talking about, even if you index that to inflation, we would still see, a decline in revenue because of increasing fuel efficiency in vehicles, increasing BEV costs. So some sort of fee for these additional vehicles that is not dependent on fuel purchase is necessary to retain the state's revenue. In addition to that, did you? Yeah,
I may have missed this in the beginning on the assumption on that dark blue line, the current gas tax is a significant decline in 5 years, and then it sorts that decline slows down, I guess, in terms of what is it that's gonna happen in those 5 years? Is that based on the idea that we're gonna adopt 126,000 electric vehicles? Is the climate goal?
yeah.
Is you think that inflation is gonna be that?
So
What is it that it means so dramatically in 5 years? That's a significant drop.
So there are plots in our report that show the specific assumptions that went behind this model. They are the base assumptions that Moves uses for the state of Vermont. Based on, they account for federal policies that impact, new vehicle sales and things like that. It's mostly EV adoption is that big decline. And if you want to see the exact trends, they are in the report.
And yeah, just a few additional points on that. So, I mean, it's right, you got a couple factors. One is changes in the average vehicle miles traveled per year.
Yep.
Which is generally going up, not down. The change in the number of vehicles, the fuel economy of the remaining internal combustion engine vehicles, and adoption of electric vehicles. There's curves for each of those things separated in the report.
Yeah.
And then you see the result of that here. We used a version of this EPA model that was put in place that represents the state of federal policy before what's known as the multi-pollutant rule, which was a Biden rule that was designed to reduce tailpipe emissions and encourage more electric vehicle adoption, which is currently being undone. So this is a more conservative EV adoption scenario than we would have thought of this being conservative a year or two ago. Now this is maybe more likely to reflect reality.
Okay.
So it's not a super aggressive EV.
To answer your question, that steep drop is a combined effect of more EV adoption in addition to vehicles just getting more efficient on average.
Conventional hybrid. So I guess my issue is we're working on a 27 budget right now. And when I move over, if we went from 50, we're already at 40. 1 year, 28 years. Now we're working in this room, in this building to solve a $10 million and $20 million problem. You're suggesting it's a $35 to $45 million problem annually.
So yeah, we're suggesting that this is an incredibly big issue. Keep in mind too that this access is adjusted to 2023 dollars. So it's not just revenue, it's also purchasing power.
Well, that's about purchasing.
Okay.
This would make it okay.
Another assumption in here that's not written on the slide, but it's in the reports. This is assuming a 4% annual inflation rate, which is based off of the National Highway Construction Price Index.
Yeah.
Inflation could always be more or less. Right?
I think I mentioned this before, but what's causing that steep decline is three things: adoption of EVs, more efficiency, mileage is about the same or even higher, I'm saying. So those two things, but the biggest drop is the inflation effect. So even if everyone's gas mileage went the same and we charged EVs a fee, it's going to continue to go down because as you said, the gas tax is a per unit. It doesn't have an inflationary piece built in like a sales tax or an income tax.
Yeah. And that was our next slide.
Which is why we
really gotta do the
presentation. Which is why we find out this thing before we ask. Which I
So are you assuming
like
we're just gonna keep getting more and more electric vehicles for the next few years, or are we gonna,
The assumptions.
because you're selling less?
Yeah, the assumptions and moves are in the report. So it assumes, we could dive into.
Yeah, we
specifics
can.
of the EV
So
assumptions. This is one way of projecting future revenue.
Are you projecting less
So-
cars or more?
Basically, more cars.
More cars,
Um,
more
What
driving.
percent of cars do you think later on we're gonna be, what percentage of all our vehicles are gonna be electric?
So again, I want to clarify that these were not assumptions that we arbitrarily chose. This is guidance from the
Biden
EPA.
era.
No,
EPA
no,
That's
stuff.
actually
pre-Biden era.
This is,
So I think this actually latest version of moves was released during the last Trump
yeah,
administration.
this was
This is not a
a
Biden
version
era
of
model.
this model that was used to be the baseline to compare against the Biden's proposed regulation.
Yeah.
So we're using that to reflect
Yeah.
the current state.
And if you're curious about the assumptions, we do have graphs of all of that in the report that we wrote. But I do want to point out, it's a great point, EV adoption might vary. So, you know, if you look at the difference between a gas tax with no BEV fees and the mileage fee for BEVs, you know, this is kind of the uncertainty realm for EV adoption, right? Because this is the additional revenue we get from charging EVs. So if you want to kind of alter in your brain the assumptions about electric vehicles that we're making, if this feels really optimistic to you, this is closer to the revenue that you could expect if you want to adjust our assumptions about electric vehicles.
So Representative McCoy's got the last question until we get some.
Where's the report? Where might we find the report?
Yeah, we emailed yesterday,
I think
the
it's on-
Is it on the
report,
committee
Yeah.
page?
there's a 2-page policy brief also, in
Okay,
addition to the 40-page report
Yeah.
and
so,
these slides.
okay, so do we have the 40-page report?
You should.
It's online. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we sent it, and we made a 2-page, easier to digest summary of it, because we recognize your time might be fleeting, but if you have questions that are not addressed in the policy brief, the specifics of everything we've done are in the
In the
report.
report.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
So it's there for your reference. So points here are that, you know, some sort of additional fee, mileage fees in this case for the state of Vermont, are essential to preserve revenue due to decreasing fuel consumption from vehicles. And that in addition to that, adjusting for inflation is the essential element for preserving the purchasing power of those fees over time. We wanted to then hop into, you know, what this means for actual household costs and their difference in costs too. So we're going to kind of segue away from overall state revenue conversation, but we can get back into that if there's more questions later. So on the left here, we have a list of some of the most common types of vehicles that are owned in the state of Vermont. The top 3 are the most common, like BEVs, PHEVs, and then the HEVs that have regenerative braking or something. And then the bottom 3 are the most common types of gas or diesel internal combustion engine vehicles. So we can see that currently vehicles like the Nissan Leaf are paying closer to 0.8 cents per mile that they travel. That's the second column here. You can see how much. Normalizing, like assuming that every vehicle travels 10,000 miles. So we can just compare across their fuel economies. And then gas and diesel vehicles are paying much more per mile right now at about 1.8 cents for the most common gas car in Vermont, the Chevrolet Silverado. Does anyone in the room own one of those?
What was the question?
Yeah,
Chevy
pick-
Silverados, Noah? Yeah.
Pickup trucks are the number one.
Yeah. So if we were to go from our current taxes, this middle column here, which are the gas tax, diesel tax, and then if you're an EV or PHEV owner, it would be that flat fee you're paying at registration. So $89 for EVs. If you were to go from that to a mileage fee, we just show it for, you know, adjusting for all vehicles. But if for this case, you can just look at the BEV if you're interested in that. We see that on average, BEV owners would see a $60 bump in costs by switching over into this mileage fee. We see that gas and diesel vehicles, if you were to switch over to a mileage fee, would on average see cost savings every year because they tend to be less fuel efficient vehicles right now and are paying more than that 1.4 cent per mile fee that we're recommending. So they would see savings.
I do, but I don't know if he wants me to ask any questions.
We can come back to it.
Okay.
We're not gonna get through it if we don't. So
Right down.
So that, you know, you can look at individual vehicles and that's helpful, but really people use their cars in household contexts. So, and to point out too, all of this information that we're showing is based on the Vermont vehicle registration and inspection records. These are real data from real Vermonters in this state. So here we're showing, you know, in a household context, vehicles travel a little bit differently, used a little bit differently. On average, if you're just a one-car household with an EV, switching over to our mileage fee program, that with this 1.4 cent per mile fee, you would see about a $70 increase in costs annually. Some EV owners might see less. So you can see kind of this bar. I'm not sure if there's too much glare on the screen. Some EV owners might see up to $60 savings in costs every year. Some might see up to a $200 increase in costs. Again, switching to a per mile fee, people travel differently in their vehicles. So it is going to vary when you're switching from a flat fee to a user-based fee. But on average, it's about a $70 increase in costs. Obviously, this scales with the number of vehicles because in a household, because vehicles tend to be used if you have them. So, for 2-car households that have 2 EVs, which is a very small percentage of households in Vermont, not many households have 2 EVs. They would see about double that, so it's about $70 a vehicle increase in cost per year. We also want to point out that because we do have this data from the Vermont inspection and registration records, we can look at how this varies spatially across the state of Vermont. So right now, people in rural areas, the lighter colors on the map, tend to spend more per mile that they're traveling. Again, this is partly because they own less fuel efficient vehicles overall in rural areas. So they're paying less per mile than our recommended mileage fee. Obviously, with a mileage fee for everyone would pay the same amount. It's kind of boring math. It's all the same color. But the important part here is the annual cost difference that they would see from switching from their current fee system into a mileage fee system. We see that people in rural areas, again, because they own those less fuel efficient vehicles on average, would actually see cost savings with, they would see, less, they would pay less per year than they currently are with a mileage fee program. Generally, people in urban areas would see slightly higher costs per year with a mileage fee program because they tend to own more fuel efficient vehicles. So last slide.
Yeah,
And then do you want to
sure.
wrap it up?
Yeah, so the last thing, so the main sort of takeaways here, I mean, there's a lot, but mileage fees by themselves aren't going to be enough, right? We saw inflation, it's a huge factor here. And so, if we adopt a revenue neutral mileage fee today and just on battery electric vehicles, then immediately there's going to be a divergence between what EV owners are paying and what people with gas and diesel vehicles are paying per mile, because those gas and diesel vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient each year. And so this gap will widen, and then we have inflation. And then maintaining out-of-state revenue only gets to part of your questions and concerns, but is if we were to transition to all light duty vehicles, we need to think about how to capture revenue from the 30% or so of vehicle miles traveled that come from out-of-state drivers in Vermont. So an option is to keep the gas tax, and everyone pays the gas tax. When you get assessed your mileage fee, you either owe the state a little more or you get reimbursed if you overpaid it. If you paid more in the gas tax than you would have with the mileage fee is one way to think about it, right? So you could, using and how this might work or could work and is being thought about in other states, is using the same odometer data that we would use to calculate your mileage fee every year. We could use that same odometer reading along with the VIN number of your vehicle to look up the fuel economy of it, just as we've done for all the figures in this presentation. We could estimate what you would have paid or what you did pay in the gas tax. And we could subtract the two and see if you owe or not money. So this way you're paying the mileage fee a little bit throughout the year like you normally do, and then you get adjustment out of it. So that's a way. And then out-of-state drivers are just paying the gas tax and they'll get reimbursed, we just keep it. So that's an option.
Are we?
That's it.
Okay, well, Representative Casey, you're up first, and then Representative Thomason, and then Representative Burke, 1, 2, 3.
So we keep rushing with the MBUF for all, but wouldn't say we did have mileage based user fee for gas also. why wouldn't I want to drive a gas guzzler afterwards? Why wouldn't I just go get a V8 at that point if I'm only paying per mile? Now it's almost like we're incentivizing the gas
So
guzzlers.
there's a couple of points there. You
I
would
got
still
one
be
more, too.
purchasing gas. And the
Right.
federal gas tax is still in place. So this is just replacing the state gas tax portion. So this federal gas tax is still a disincentive in that way. The other part of that is that you're still buying a ton of gas, which is incredibly expensive. So that in itself is another disincentive. This doesn't mean it can't exist with additional incentives for electric vehicles, but the purpose of this mileage fee was to right-size how people traveling on the roads are contributing to the system that pays those roads. We weren't trying to create a type of fee that catches every incentive.
Well, I think on that point, I think the purpose, and at least of what we've been asked to look at is one, just what would a revenue neutral mileage fee look like? And how should it be written so that it continues with its purpose over time? And two, the focus of my understanding of the legislation, and at least what I would recommend if it were up to me, is this is not to combine a bunch of different policy objectives together, but this is a fee that was originally put in place back in the 20s, 30s
18.
to, as a road user charge to pay for construction and maintenance. And so the purpose isn't to incentivize anyone to buy one type of vehicle or another. It's to everyone pays their fair share for using roads.
The other question I had is, this is again, assuming that we go to a mileage-based user fee for everything. Want the border town gas stations, they'd be happier than, be happy, wouldn't they? Because they'll be, for once, we'll get New Hampshire people wanting to come over here to buy gas, and New York will be
So-
wanting to come over here and buy gas.
This actually gets to our last point on the slide here, that last thing that Greg was saying. We actually, part of our, I mean, obviously, this is a conversation for 1 or 2 years from now, if the state decides to expand to a statewide program. But it's absolutely an option to keep the gas tax in Vermont so that everyone's paying the gas tax and move to a reimbursement style system, where if you're a local Vermont resident, you either get charged an additional amount based on what you would have paid with the mileage fee, or you get refunded an amount.
I wonder what the bureaucracy would look like for that.
There's a couple of states who are actually interested in this right now, in addition to what we've been researching. So there might be, 1 or 2 years down the road, there actually might be some clear guidance.
You would have all the information you would need to charge the mileage fee using odometer readings at the inspections, which is the current scheme that seems to be moving forward or that's been talked about. The data you collect in that process is all the information you would need to figure out this rate adjustment. Because you know how far you have the odometer reading. So you have the mileage and you have the VIN number. And with the VIN number, you can cross-reference a federal database that gives you the fuel economy. And then you have, with those two numbers, you can estimate what you paid in the gas tax.
And this is just one option that would need to be much more fleshed out when that, I mean, it's a great point. Like, how do we make sure that we're retaining the revenue from out-of-state drivers who are traveling on our roads?
Well, I mean, you only gotta drive, what, a mile into the state?
Yeah.
And turn around, so we're gonna worry about charging them 1 mile of distance on our roads?
And I think to better answer that question, we would need better data on like how many people are actually doing that and how much of our revenue constitutes out of state. I think the rough percentage that I've heard thrown around is 20% of state gas tax revenues from out of state drivers. But I think, that's a question that we need to dive into with a bit more time. It just wasn't the focus of what we're doing here.
And, another point, I don't know if we mentioned in the report or not too, is you can take this as an opportunity, so the gas tax being generated from out-of-state drivers will also decline in its purchasing power and its overall revenue because out-of-state drivers are also using more fuel-efficient vehicles. You could increase the gas tax under this scheme and collect more revenue from out-of-state drivers, but Vermonters aren't going to pay that if they're being reimbursed with this mileage fee that already comes for that. So you could use it as a scheme to capture more revenue from out-of-state drivers. You could be like New Hampshire. It's like putting the toll on the border. You can, there's all sorts of things you can do if you want it. But, but the point is there are ways to capture this revenue. for a number of reasons that Patrick was mentioning and you're mentioning, there's things that have to be thought through more, I think.
I'll be driving a car that gets less gas mileage, I'll tell you that, when we go do. For sure.
I mean, if you drive
That
a
is
Ford
right.
F-150 right now, you're doing more than the average person pay per month, is the current situation.
Representative Tomlinson?
Thanks. Thanks for this presentation. It's so helpful and informative. And I just wanted to appreciate the concept about the reimbursement, because that would also address this concern that I've heard from folks around just having to pay that fee in bulk once a year as opposed to paying as you go. So for folks where that could be a challenge, I could see this help address that. Although I certainly would also have questions about the administrative burden, but I guess that's kind of down the road. It is implicit in these recommendations, is there kind of a recommendation for indexing the gas tax as well? I mean, that was kind of included in your projections. It seems like that would be necessary in order to achieve fairness.
It wasn't exactly the scope of what we were asked to do, but the recommendations that we have for indexing the mileage fee to inflation could easily be used for the gas tax, although we don't explicitly state it in that way in our
Right.
report. In the full report, there is a table that outlines different measures of inflation and recommendations for what we think is the most appropriate method for applying an inflation rate in the state of Vermont. Just quick summary of what that is. We recommend basically looking at your biggest budget items from transportation, whether that's, construction and materials, whether that's wages or administrative costs, and choosing a measure of inflation that best measures that change in costs. So if it's materials, we recommend using the something like the National Highway Construction Cost Index, which actually measures the change in cost of transportation specific materials. There's also the PPI. There's a list of things. The most common measure of inflation is the Consumer Price Index, and that would probably be a more appropriate measure if the biggest budget item for transportation is something like wages, because that reflects consumer costs. So it'd be things that you're using with your things you're using your salary money. But that's all outlined in our report, and you could take some of that and have discussions about what that would mean for the gas tax.
Thanks.
Representative Burke is next, and then.
Yeah, just realizing that nothing is easy. But, as we're having discussions in this building about getting rid of inspections or going to regular inspections, that's another, how would that jive with needing to, a simple way to determine mileage would be through your annual inspection.
Well, I mean, so are not tasked with looking at that, and I read about that in the news this morning, but, and we were joking about it on the way over here, it's like, hey, we're coming to talk about this, and they're getting rid of
The way we were doing.
But I mean, so I think it comes down to what the concerns about the inspections are. And if, I don't know, so in principle, you could still require people to come in and get their odometer looked at real quick, by someone that's not yourself. So there's some auditing, system or ability there. Some states have talked about self-reporting it. You would still, you need some way, obviously, to do some sort of audit system to keep people honest.
Especially with AI generated images and things right now, we see a lot of additional administrative complexities with getting the right amount of revenue from a system like that.
I think, the fact that we have inspections is really convenient because there's already a whole database system set up that collects various information, including the odometer, and it's in a database that can be combined with the VINs. And we've developed at UVM, we do a lot of work for the state where we've been collecting and correlating that data to evaluate different policies that affect.
It's how we were able to do this whole analysis is with the annual inspection data.
So I think, if there are some, if there is a desire to get rid of the inspections for one reason or another, I think there are still opportunities to collect the odometer data one way or another.
And there are additional, just to add on to that quickly, there are additional ways to collect mileage information. There's plug-in devices for vehicles, and there's RFID tags that can kind of scan So there's other options, but as Patrick was saying earlier, they are more expensive to administer, more expensive per individual. And there's additional sometimes privacy concerns in trying to get people to either enroll or accept this as a part of their life. So just other considerations.
Just one more question, and I may have missed it in the beginning. When you say battery electric vehicles, are you including plug-in hybrids in that category? No.
Plug-in hybrids were not considered a part of the battery electric vehicle.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I just, one is, I think we're muddying the water when we're looking at doing all vehicles, when really we're talking about battery electric, bringing them into the system to pay their fair share. And I was all for mileage-based user fee for battery electric. I think looking at that other piece is fine, but we don't want to muddy the water taking that first step. I have a bit of concern of how you came up with the rate, because treating every vehicle based on a mile at a time rather than their fuel efficiency. Lower fuel efficiency vehicles cause other problems too, and that's not part of your calculations here, or coming up with the rate. And then the other piece was, we know the gas tax costs 3% overhead to collect. Have you calculated what the overhead is for the mileage-based user fee? What the efficiency would be?
Yeah, so I think that's in.
Short answer, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But the prior, I think that prior study from legislature estimated at like, I want to say 3%. Yeah.
3.5 to 5, that's not so bad. That's assuming
Ongoing costs.
you have the inspection piece that helps.
That's doing.
Yeah, no.
Odometer
So
level.
that's not too bad. And in my mind, I've always thought, let's move forward with mileage-based user fee, let electric vehicle owners like myself pay their fair share. But I also thought we would put on an inflationary figure on that, and also the same inflationary figure on fuel tax, so that we don't drive ourselves down into a hole. So just adding the battery electric doesn't really solve anything without inflationary pieces to it.
And you can see, like, if we stuck with the mileage fee for BEVs and dealt with the inflation piece, I mean, we're doing a lot better, even if we are leaving that chunk there, that maybe another $10 million.
We've added a couple of inflationary pieces in some of the funding formulas for municipalities. And there's a formula that, is around that does that. So, that could be the one considered.
Yeah, we have in the report too, we've written a formula and you look at it. I mean, it's pretty standard, it's price index multiplies.
And there are a couple of, there's many states that have indexed their gas tax to inflation. There's 2 states that have used that NHCCI, the National Highway Construction Cost Index. I believe it's Alabama and Mississippi. So there's precedent from other states for actual like statutory language. For the CPI, there's I think 7 states that have indexed their state gas tax to the CPI. And then if you're interested in this more construction materials cost, there's also 2 states that have done that. So there's ample examples of states that have done this. Thank you.
And I think your first point though is about, we didn't consider the other external costs of gasoline and these vehicles. And so that is intentional here for our scope, which is simply the, replacing, think about this as a highway user fee for roadway maintenance costs. To the extent that you want to consider the environmental externalities of using gasoline or diesel, you could always consider things like retaining a portion of the gas tax to account for the total cost of carbon and something like that if you wanted to. There's California, for example, part of their gas tax, a percentage of that is for environmental fees. So those are always options, but that's not what we were tasked at looking at.
Thank you.
Representative White?
Yeah, so my questions are on the heels of several other colleagues. so number one, kind of on the heels of what Representative Couch was suggesting, and to me, it feels like mileage-based user fee for battery electric vehicles that is indexed for inflation makes sense, coupled with indexing our gas tax, which we haven't done, but I'm really happy to hear that there are examples in other states where they have done that. Is that included in the 40-page report? Okay, great. And then my other concern, which again, Representative Couch was suggesting, you know, I think it's important that we don't, in the end, net out to penalizing battery electric vehicles, because there are a lot of reasons why we have said that these are good for our state in terms of emissions, and, you know, getting off of fossil fuels. So, you know, if we were to look at that scenario where we are putting one cent on, 1.4 cent per mile on battery electric vehicles, plus a, index gas tax on, combustion engines. I would just want to make sure, and again, this may be outside of your purview, but I think we don't want to net out so that that battery electric vehicles are kind of paying more. I think we're looking for equity. We want everybody to be paying into the roads.
So you're still gonna save money with the EV on your, well, okay, if
Yeah.
there's the fact that the vehicles cost different amounts of money to buy, but you're still buying gasoline for the internal combustion engine vehicle, which is thousands of dollars per year. And these fees are $100 or $200 a year at most. So going from the $89 flat fee to per mileage fee, which is, you know, basically gonna roughly double the cost of that fee on a battery electric car, you're still saving thousands in gas.
But you've also got the cost of electricity for the battery
Yeah.
electric vehicle.
And that is currently at least pretty inexpensive, but we know there's AI data centers and everything, right? So, you know, you're right, I think, and the other thing to point out too is there's still the federal gas tax. And so with the BEV, you're still not paying that. So you know, if you were to do this today and we could, you know, in additional work, we could put the total sort of costs of owning and operating these vehicles into these type of figures and probably show that you're still doing well with an electric vehicle. You know, although it depends on the varying and now sort of disappeared EV tax credits on this sort of thing, but
One of the additional things I want to point out too is that EVs in Vermont on average are driven more miles per year than gas or diesel vehicles. So, you know, if you look at the average mileage fees in the one car household, gas or diesel vehicle would be paying about 152 a year. EVs would be paying about 158. That slight just $6 bump is because on average EVs are just driven more, so with a per mile fee. And that's in the report too. We have mileage broken out by fuel types. Obviously it depends on how many vehicles you own, how old they are, your household makeup, it's relative, but that is just another kind of, I guess, marketing, branding nuance.
Yeah, and you pulled that from inspection data?
Yes, yeah, actual Vermont vehicles, and we have range estimates too, because you can talk in averages all day, but
yes. So in the report,
average
you
doesn't
have
represent anyone's, the fun statistic.
more detailed versions of this table that have like every combination of
Yeah.
car and household size.
In
and
addition
this
to
data-
rural, urban and suburban households.
And this is from this data, we've done this calculation for every car and every household in the state using the actual inspection records, using the same data methods you would use for the fee. And so what you're seeing in these ranges are, if you did this today, this is what people would have actually paid. So you'll see, so the report's long because we've tried to break it down in a bunch of different ways.
Representative McCoy, you're up.
Okay.
Representative Keiser.
Hey there. So thanks for all this, of course. Is it the reason you looked at just the state gas taxes because you were directed to do that? Okay. Do you have any idea how many dollars come back from every dollar that if we send the federal government for gas tax?
I believe with Vermont, it's 1 for 3.
1 for 3. Okay, so
Isn't that, or for
No,
overall
we-
transportation revenue?
Yeah, now for the gas tax, I think we're one of these net
Federal fund that comes back to. the city.
Yeah, in other words, so if you could break that down, it's, yeah, in other words, you get about 80,
No, it's higher. Yeah, we're one of the, I forget what you call it, but we
But
get
if
more
we-
than our fair share.
excuse me, if we send the federal government $1, you get back 80 cents?
Well, we get like
No.
1.3.
We get 1.3?
It's more, right?
Okay, whatever. Okay, so there's my argument. So effectively, by not gathering the federal gas tax, we are shorting ourselves that revenue that usually comes back to us.
No, because we're keeping the
still be-
federal gas tax still.
Whoa, no, excuse me. You have an EV that does not buy gas.
Yeah.
You have a fee that is supposed to replace the gas taxes. That's what my phrase is, gas taxes. So if you don't get back the federal gas tax, you are shorting yourself what we would have gotten back if it was gasoline. So my argument is,
The counting doesn't work that way. The money comes back based on BMT estimates for each state. There's a big formula,
What's
So-
the
vehicle miles passed. And which is collected, there's this thing called the Highway Performance Management System that estimates the amount of vehicle travel in every single state. And those estimates, along with population and other things, are used to apportion federal funds from the trust fund for the various formula funding programs. And so the fact that we may have more EVs than some other state isn't going to, at least the best of my knowledge, unless something has changed, affect what we
I
get.
guess I'm not getting through. We currently now, if you have a gas vehicle, you're paying some 50 odd cents a gallon. 38 of it is Vermont, and the balance of it goes to the federal government. The federal government receives those dollars from us, and then they turn around and use that same pot of money.
So that's what he's saying,
Yeah,
it's not the same.
It goes
pot of money.
into the highway trust
Time
fund.
out. We get that federal money back, don't you?
It's,
Don't
there's
you
a lot
get
of
that
like
money back?
laundering that goes on before it comes
Okay,
back.
I think we're splitting hairs here because the fact is that we get federal highway dollars based on, or not based on, but because we get federal highway money because of a gas tax and a federal diesel tax. So my argument is that if we're receiving a rebate from that tax, you can call it many things, but if you get money back from the federal government based on highway projects, we should then, for a fairness issue, get also a portion of the federal gas tax in the fee that we're proposing. Anyway, that's my argument.
I hear you, yeah. I think that's another conversation.
Our turns. We'll wait our turns. Hey, back over to you, and you had your hand up if you're all set, Representative.
Thank you.
Well,
And then it's Representative
one
Thomas
of the
next.
problems that we kind of been discussing here, and I'm just looking at Jed stepping ahead, I really don't wanna go to a mileage-based user fee on gasoline, and why would we bother? When there's these headaches of trying to go over that in a few years, why bother? Why not just deal with the electric vehicle issue of them not paying their fair share on our roads? Why would you want to go ahead and bother with the gasoline when it's already got its system? And if you got a problem, the governor doesn't want to raise gas taxes, I understand, but sometime probably gonna have to. Why wouldn't we just
I think
easier to raise the tax instead of sitting there going through this whole new bureaucracy for?
We're recording this.
So I think you're right. Another option is to have a mileage fee for EVs and raise the gas tax for internal combustion engine vehicles. And you could raise it, but you'd have to keep raising it because the fuel economy is going to keep changing. And so that means coming back here every year or so and discussing what the new rate should be and having to pass legislation. But that's
That's
an
our
option.
job.
That's not.
On top of that, I do want to point out, and we've studied this in some of our prior journal articles that I'd be happy to send you to. There's also just some additional equity concerns with the gas tax. As it stands, it is a regressive fee. So lower income rural households tend to pay a lot more in gas taxes because they own less fuel efficient vehicles. So they're paying the brunt of gas tax revenue in the state of Vermont. People with higher fuel efficiency vehicles aren't paying into that system as equally. So there's just some additional concerns with the gas tax as a concept. It was originally, thought of in the 1920s when basically every vehicle was the same. And then with the diversification of vehicle types that we have today, it's gotten, the range of what you could pay in gas taxes has grown a lot broader, with the brunt of the responsibility falling on low-income rural households with less fuel-efficient vehicles. So I think there's some conceptual reasons why, in addition to revenue reasons, why the gas tax might be a direction the state would want to move away from.
Representative Thomason?
Thanks. I have a question about the administrative costs, because you mentioned like a base administrative fee, and it sounds like the MBUF is estimated like 3.5 to 5% admin. And this might be a question for the administration. What is the administrative cost rate for the gas tax or fuel taxes?
About 1% less, probably.
1% or less. Okay, just kind of curious, trying to get a sense of the comparative rates of admin fees, because that doesn't sound like it's not massively more to do the MBUF. So it might be a consideration. Is it appropriate to charge an admin fee for one type of taxation versus another, depending on how different the administrative costs end up coming out to?
The biggest difference between the structural taxes is that state gas taxes apply to distributors, whereas mileage fee is scaled because it's to individual users. So there are some pretty genuine scaling issues there that you probably, it obviously depends on what the actual costs are. But other states propose an administrative cost for this reason.
It's one way. Representative White, you were, I believe, next, if you were still in that spot.
I was just wondering if, I see Logan in the corner there, and I was just wondering if he wanted to speak to the conversation about money from the gas tax and federal money versus state, just to clarify.
Logan.
And you can pass
We're
this.
not gonna solve that
Can you
today.
rephrase the question?
Looking at the director of I'm happy to come in and talk to you about all of that. I don't think there's anything said right now.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Thank you, Logan. Representative Bouch, and anybody else that had their hand up?
Just thank you for all this work and all your data. One of the pieces, so say, if we wanted to move forward, we could do it fairly quick for a battery electric. Well, we set the rate, we turn on the buttons at inspection. But one of the questions was how we pay. So, you could just pay at your inspection or at registration based on the miles, or there's been discussed, I'm not saying one way or another, to allow you to pay on a quarterly basis and all that. Did your reports look at any of that? Okay, that's okay, thanks.
And those, a good point, are all policy decisions. Like Representative McCoy, you're up next.
So I just
That'll
wanted
probably be,
to get clarification on what Representative Keiser was saying. So currently, when we collect the federal gas tax, do you get that from the gas stations that are
But
giving that information to the state monthly? Or I'm looking to.
Well, it's at the distributor level, so it's a wholesaler.
Okay, so.
This is why it
you
has
have-
low administrative costs.
Okay, so we know how much gas is actually being sold to them.
Yeah.
And then we have a federal gas tax attached to that. So that's what you're saying. So it isn't based on miles traveled by vehicles in the state. It's based on what we actually bring into the state and are taxed at the distribution level.
That's the money that goes to the federal government. And that
But the point is that fuel sales in a state is what's taxed. It doesn't matter if you drove here from New York and bought the fuel or here, it's just based on fuel sales.
So it's based on fuel sales. So right now, currently, I think what Representative Keiser is saying, we're not capturing the miles traveled by electric vehicles for federal gas tax. All the federal gas tax that we send, which we get, we really don't know what we're getting. Is it $5 for every $1? We're really not sure what we're getting, but we are not capturing any $0 for federal gas tax. And I think what he's trying to get at is there a way we can, I mean, it's gas that the federal government is taxing, but we're losing out on federal money big time because we're not sending gas tax.
So let me.
You know what I'm saying?
I think there's.
I do hear what you're
Okay.
saying. I think there's just a space confusion about,
Well-
there's money that goes up and money that comes back down,
Yeah.
and they're different.
But there's the other thing, I mean, we can, or Logan, I guess, in the corner, can fill in more of the details. And we are happy to do that as well, but that it's not, so one thing is the the federal gas tax, the fact that there is no battery electric vehicle fee or mileage fee being discussed at the federal level is a federal problem. And
Right.
this is why the Highway Trust Fund hasn't funded itself completely for well over a decade at this point. So they have general fund transfers. And that's basically what's going to happen to our highway funds with our state highway funds. If we don't address these issues, you're going to have to start transferring funds, and it's being proposed to transfer funds from other places to have enough money to build bridges and fill potholes and take care of stuff. So that's the federal gas tax and the money the federal government's losing by not having a mileage fee is, I think, something that's not really in our control
Okay,
here.
so I think what you're trying to tell me is that it doesn't matter what we send up. We use X amount of.
And that money
send
gets-
X amount of dollars and we send it.
Yeah,
to
it
the
goes into a
feds.
federal bank
Right.
account and
But-
then it,
But they have to calculate what the state of Vermont is getting. So they're either calculating based on number of roads miles that we have in the state.
Yeah.
Or some other vehicle. And I think that's what
There's-
maybe we can get from.
there's,
Logan.
yeah, exactly. There's a
Okay.
whole series of formula
Okay.
funds and they are
So it's
based on
not based on.
what
gas.
we get. Yeah,
But
But I think
Yes.
a
Yeah.
good point would be that the amount of money that's being sent from all states up to the federal government is less because of the national.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
But
you know,
it's
from a
not-
national perspective, that funding.
But they
part
don't
would be a lot.
base
Yeah,
what's
they-
getting.
They don't tag our money and know which ones came from Vermont to give back.
Okay, now I get it. I think that's where we were.
Last part you made, or the part you made about the point of where you get your money from because the gas tax is not funding the roads, is absolutely where we are at. And you were asked to set a rate or to suggest a rate that we would charge for mileage-based user fees for electric vehicles. And you're suggesting it's 1.4, and there's a 40-page plus report as to why it's 1.4.
And a two-page policy group.
Thank you very much. And the agency still has to answer and come up with how we're going to collect it, how we're going to reconcile it, how often we're going to index it, how the payments are going to be made, and all of the other pieces that go with it that were brought up. But for your part, what you were asked to do is that you're recommending that a 1.4 cents per mile would be the rate for electric vehicles at this time. And there was some discussion and some pieces that we might suggest it would work, could or could not work for other vehicles. But right now, that would be the rate discussion. That's where we're ending it for today, and we can dig into other parts of it. Thank you very much for all of your work. And thanks for coming down. And we're going to stay live. We have another fairly hefty policies and file up and piece to dig into next. So thank you very much. And we're going to stay live, but we're going to transition. So it'll take a minute, and we're going back into this subject in electric vehicle supply. Electric vehicle. EVSE stands for. And then we're going to pick up where we were. Was it as soon as yesterday?
Wednesday?
Was it yesterday? Yeah.
Wednesday.
And there was 1,000,001 questions back and forth, and we've got 40 plus 45 minutes to dig back into that subject. And there was Scott, we appreciate you coming back. Mark, oh, we have Will this time too. Oh, a new to our committee. So we're gonna make sure that we get to that. That your name came up in the last testimony several times, but thank you very much for being here. And we haven't heard from Mark yet, but Scott was in the hot seat for quite a while yesterday. And we'll pick up in that part, and if there's a part I'm missing about setting the stage, you could probably do that for us, but we're trying to pick up from where we were. And
You want to share the PowerPoints just so we can get back over? You want me to? I don't have the, do you have the number for the meeting?
Oh, I should.
I know that.
Thanks, though.
You're working with the presentation from the 11th.
Yeah, start off exactly.
Back to the 11th.
This one.
Oh,
no,
sure,
back to
we're
the
in
narrow. Okay, so let's see.
Okay.
So Wednesday, the 11th, and Scott Dolan. Those are serious. Slide 7, I think is that.
Very bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
How much else?
that's the problem. That's why the committee next door spends all their time on tax policy. Taxing and setting up a tax and dealing with the tax is incredibly difficult. It has a wide range of questions, and people that make an entire living just trying to figure that out, huh? Know anybody like that?
Hey, we tried to be an hour.
All right.
No background.
So this is, I think this is where we left off yesterday. Were there any lingering questions people have at the top of their mind right now before I?
No, but I think the summary was it's the Wild West out there. All this charging infrastructure came at us, whether it's public, private, or maybe sort of in between. And at some point, Weights and Measures needs to come in and say, hey, you're selling to the public. We need to make sure this equipment is accurate, and meeting the state laws around selling the product to the public.
Yeah, I mean, we use the terms accurate and correct, right? So not only just accurate, but also correct, like receipts being accurate, all of the other things that are important. Again, we talked about yesterday, the price being advertised in advance so consumers know what they're getting to begin with. So yeah, these are the apps. This is where we left off. All right, to kind of get into, now we're getting into more of the numbers of what we did this past year. On the DC fast, you get 2 columns here, right? We expected 84 devices, 96 meters. Some devices have 2 meters. DC ones, most of them just have a single one, but there are a couple. The caveat to that 96 meters that were tested is there are 78 Tesla devices in the state of Vermont that are having a communication issue with our testing equipment. Both Tesco and Tesla are working on that. So there was an extra 78 devices that we were trying to test, but we couldn't due to technical issues with the equipment. Of those DC fasts, we officially approved 26. Those actually got gold Weights and Measures stickers on them. We rejected 7. We had 3 meters that were actually out of the 2% tolerance. And then the range of errors was to the bar to the right? Most of the ones that are out of tolerance are actually giving energy away instead of keeping. Obviously, consumers don't tend to complain about that. So that's of less concern to us than if it was the other way around.
I realize that, we're at the beginning of this, you guys are at the beginning of it, but you're dealing with nationwide, you're in communication with other states that are trying to do this. Are these failure rates what we expected?
currently Vermont is the only one sharing data nationally.
Wow, interesting.
And again, just to give you some background, so I went and presented at the National Conference of Weights and Measures interim meeting in January in Mobile, Alabama. We have some revisions submitted for the handbook based on what we have found. I have then been appointed the chair of the National Council of Weights and Measures EV Task Group. It has been in existence for 2 years. Hasn't had a meeting yet. We're scheduled our first meeting for March of this coming month. So we will start addressing the issues nationally. One of the things that that has been bantered around is having a national data share. So we actually have some because even Vermont, these numbers, it's all small data, right? It's just small numbers. Until we get bigger numbers, it's hard to say, again, whether this is representative of the country. This is just, as I said, what I can say is this is what we found last year. And that's kind of as much as
And Teresa, remind me where we're at. So we have 370 devices that have registered with you.
those are the devices
Different
that we-
locations have 370.
That's the number of devices we inspected last year.
How many are?
Licensed, we'll get to, that's another slide coming up.
All right.
This is just like inspection stuff. So AC, you can see the same thing. We get to 189 devices, 274 meters. A lot more of those have 2 meters per device. Approved, rejected, and you can see the rates of error there. Most of the rejected ones, a fair number of them actually were devices the manufacturer didn't mean to be in commercial service. They were never designed to be. So somebody either sold or bought devices that they thought they could put in the public purview, but even the manufacturers like, no, these devices shouldn't be being used for that. They're more of you can use it, the car dealership can use this to charge its own vehicles in the background. It's not a device that was ever meant to be available to the public.
Plus Wild Wild West kind of.
Yes. Again, just anecdotal findings, labeling of capacities and the pricing issues that we kind of touched on yesterday. Those have been kind of 2 touchstone issues of what we saw anecdotally, not as far as the numbers go. Different to most of our weighing and measuring devices, most of the time, one business will own devices and they'll be all in one spot. In this case, we have numerous businesses that own devices in even different towns, if not even different counties. So there'll be devices spread around the state. Okay, licensing data. So officially, as of 2 weeks ago, when the last I pulled this, we had 259 plugs licensed at $25 a piece. So we are starting to bring in some money on this. Those devices were licensed at 54 different locations and by 40 different businesses. And the pie chart here is just me I roughly qualify these as what types of businesses these were. So again, you can see Tesla has the largest share of them, being kind of the outlier because they own all the big DC fast chargers. They don't actually sell those, or at least they did in the past. I think they're beginning to. We've got a lot of car dealerships that have them. Quite a few gas stations have put them in. Hospitality, that's kind of a broad category of inns and other things and just places that are weird. Sometimes they're open to the public. Municipalities, usually town offices, town parking lots, parking rides, quite a few of those. Recreation facilities, again, usually owned by towns as well. Sometimes by the town rec departments. Tourism, we had some property management groups, like people that own different tenant buildings or even commercial rental facilities, right? They put a charger outside of their thing so that the customers of their tenants can use it while they're, say, in having their hair done or something. We've also looked of the commercially available devices in the state, give or take about a third are owned by the public utilities, Vermont Power, Burlington Electric, et cetera, et cetera. The way the current language sits in statutes, those devices, it's questionable whether we should be licensing those devices or not. And again, that would be a great thing to get cleared up so we know exactly what is where. It would be probably advantageous if it was all underneath the same enforcement umbrella, so there's no question about who has jurisdiction when there's issues with service complaint. But those are things that need to be cleared up statutorily. Does that answer all the questions you had about licensing?
These are commercially licensed.
Yep.
That are selling,
yep.
that are paying some level of tax on those.
Not all of them paying tax. We've tried to address that. And again, I've been in communication with Will. It's nice to meet you in person.
We appreciate you coming because that was a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So yeah, they are selling, like I said, there are some brands that are collection tax. There are some that, again, as of the kind of the end of last year, that we don't believe were. So we've raised that with them.
so just to clarify, when we're talking tax, this is the 6% sales tax that, without any changes to our legislation, is a requirement in this type of business, selling this. Now, when I buy gas at the gas pump, I don't pay 6% sales tax. Just so there's a disconnect, or it's different. And buying gas tax, I'm paying gas tax, but I'm not paying sales tax. And the expectation, correct me if I'm wrong, is anybody who has a electric charger and they're charging money for it, but sometimes it could be at a business or at a store or at a car dealer. If you're charging money for it, then you should be paying sales tax.
I would defer to Will on that.
Okay. I'm not
If you don't mind.
saying one way or the other how I believe. I'm just sort of saying, trying to understand where we are today.
You mind identifying yourself and answering?
Sure. Will Baker, General Counsel of the Tax Department. That's right. For highway fuels are exempt from sales tax.
Okay,
There's a separate tax that's collected by
right.
the Agency of Transportation.
And sales tax on electricity, sold electricity is sales tax eligible at 6%?
Yes.
We must get into it because we've been thinking about this, or I have anyways. So at my house, I have a charger and I have a meter, and that meter goes in, takes care of my house. But then my charger goes to my car and I pay the electric company specifically for that charge at a certain rate. Should that electric company be charging sales tax?
No. No. So just to give a little bit of background here. We have a sales tax in Vermont since the 1960s. That's 6%. Collects about $635 million a year for the education fund. There's been to my knowledge, there's been no deliberation or legislation or anything like that regarding the application of the sales tax to electricity for electric vehicles. All of this is just old existing law. We have a very old and typical sales tax in Vermont, similar to many, many other states. Electricity is specifically defined in the state sales tax statute and specifically identified and specifically subject to sales tax. Now, there are a lot of exemptions from the sales tax as well, and energy and fuel and electricity is prominent in those exemptions for a variety of places. Residential use is one of them. So all fuels, electricity, cordwood, any fuel for domestic use in the home is exempt from sales tax. So your electric utilities know that. So when they put the meter on a residence, they know to code it so that they're not going to be collecting sales tax there. A similar exemption applies to farming activity, manufacturing activity. So there's a lot of exemptions for electricity in the sales tax. Typically, the kind of typical scenarios would be your residence, of course, no sales tax. If there's a residence, say someone has a residence with a small auto mechanic shop sort of connected to it in the garage, the utility might have 2 meters, one for the residence and one for the shop. And there's no exemption for automotive shops. And so all that electricity is subject to sales tax used in the shop. So there could be 2 meters, or in some cases, there's some sort of study or consideration of the amount of use of the 2 uses. And the utility takes that into consideration and applies sales tax only as a percentage of the electricity. That's very typical in large manufacturing plants because sales, electricity is exempt from sales tax on the manufacturing floor, but not for all of the purposes. So you'll have a large manufacturing floor and then you'll have administrative offices, the finance office, sales, CEO, all the offices, that's all subject to sales tax. The manufacturing floor is not. And so these companies actually do studies to determine how much electricity is used in the manufacturing process, and the utility takes that into consideration. So that's kind of, it works that way across many different industries. The electric utilities know all this, and that's been in place for years and years and years. So then the EVs came along. Again, there's been no specific consideration of this to my knowledge, but the retail sale of electricity is subject to sales tax unless an exemption applies. So if a customer is purchasing electricity, then that would be subject to sales tax. That's just the kind of standard interpretation from the existing law. Has nothing to do with EVs specifically. It's simply the sale of electricity.
So just to clarify, if I owned a gas station, it's all part of my business, and I buy electricity through the meter, I pay a 6% sales tax on that. But then again, if I have a charger too, open to the public, I'm paying the 6% that comes through to the charger, but I am supposed to charge the user of that public charger 6% too, or I end up paying for it?
The way that we sort of discuss this with utilities is that that's right, the gas station has no exemption, so all that electricity that they use on their account, on that meter at the gas station, that would be subject to the sales tax already, right there. And so we've discussed a few different options for the gas station. If they're already paying sales tax on that and they're simply selling the electricity at cost, it's a wash. In other words, they could separately meter the EV charger and purchase that electricity from the electric utility purchase for resale, which is exempt. A retailer buying something to sell, if I buy 1,000 televisions for my retail establishment, when I buy them now, it's a sales tax. I collect sales tax when I sell them. So there's no pyramiding of the sales tax. So the same would apply here, just like any other retailer. If they wanted to purchase some of that electricity from the electric utility wholesale, and they could retail it at the meter and collect 6%. That it's kind of a paperwork exercise if they're simply selling the electricity for what they paid for it. The issue is if there's a markup. So if they're marking up that electricity, then we've got a problem because the final customer is paying more for that electricity, and so the sales tax has to be collected on the markup. And there are other industries that operate the very same way. For example, if you buy, it's a different tax, it's the rooms tax, but it's very similar. If you reserve a hotel room on an online booking platform, you're going to pay the price for that hotel room to the online platform. They've purchased that from the hotel. They have contracts with the hotels. They pay them a certain amount. They take a markup themselves, and then they sell you the hotel room. And that markup is that's their profit for their service. And so however they want to do it, the point is that rooms tax has to be collected on the entire amount that the customer pays for the room. Same rules for sales tax. However they want to do it, the customer price has to be accounted for if it's being sold over and over again. And again, that applies to a variety of industries all the same.
Thank you. That's
Just to clarify, so if I have a level 1 in my house and it's connected into my residential meter and I charge my EV with it, I am not charged sales tax?
That's right.
Thank you.
All uses at your residential property have been the tradition, the practical application of this throughout, since the beginning of the sales tax in 1969 has been all uses in that home are exempt from sales tax, even though, you know, it's possible that, say you're having work done on your house by a contractor, they come in and they plug in all their batteries for their equipment. Because, you know, the next day they're going somewhere else and they're gonna work and they need to charge it up. We all know that that little amount of electricity that they have used is not for the domestic use of that home, but we couldn't possibly parse out all those uses, and so just generally speaking, whether it's your fuel oil, home heating oil delivery, or your electricity delivery, if it's going to that house, there's a presumption that it's all domestic use. And we've applied the same construct to EV charging at your home electric account.
And so all these apps that we saw listed, the 40 plus whatever apps, and you're going in and buying electricity at a whole myriad of different places. They're collecting the money from you. They're from the buyer. They're remitting the sales tax to the state of Vermont, to you, I guess, you know, you're the tax collector. Each one of them is paying that 6% forward to you.
It should be, and we've done outreach to the industry, and the agency bank has been helpful and kind of sharing with us their lists of players in, you know, the market in Vermont and the companies that are active in Vermont. What I will say is there could be an EV charging station at Will's gas station, but you know, it's operated by one of the, so it's not necessarily going to be Will's gas station that is collecting sales tax, but it could be the operator of those things. And we've worked with various various businesses in the industry about this issue of marking, whether the electricity is marked up or not. And it's a, you know, this is like you've described with sort of the other aspects of this. This is a new emerging field of cast of characters. And you know, we've been working with them about all the different iterations of their business and whether they are marking up or not, or some of them charge a fee for if you stay too long, there's a fee associated with that. Some of them charge a fee just in addition to the metered electricity. Some of them charge a parking fee. And so we've worked through that with them, that not all these charges are necessarily subject to sales tax, but if it's a charge necessary to complete the sale of electricity, it's subject to sales tax.
What?
And if we wanted to supplant the sales tax with a tax that mirrored the gas tax, but it was for energy on these level 2 and level 3 chargers that are being inspected by the state on the weights and measures method, could we do that?
I mean, the legislature can do anything, I suppose.
I mean, like from your perspective, in the tax department.
You would, yeah, you could exempt
How to do that.
electricity sold at EV chargers from the sales tax. And then you could subject them to a different kind of tax or no tax at all. That's the way it works right now with the motor fuels. So motor fuels are specifically exempt from sales tax, even though they are a sale of tangible property in Vermont and would otherwise be subject to sales tax. But because they're subject to the highway taxes, they're exempt from sales tax. It's all that is mutually exclusive. Same with automobiles and registered trailers and things like that. If it's subject to the purchase and use tax in Vermont, it's exempt from sales tax and vice versa. So it's not both.
Should these electric vehicles are going out on the road, and that's the purpose of this electricity, so we're going to use the roads. Should that money be helping pay for the roads?
I'm here as a legal technician, not in the advocacy or policy. As a role, I don't have any.
Have items been changed from sales tax to purchase and use, or from purchase and use over to sales tax? Has that,
in the past.
Yeah. has that been done?
I don't recall. It's, as far as I know, it's been that way for many years. There's been some changes with ATVs and those snowmobiles and something.
Has been some change.
I don't recall. I think it's always been,
No,
if it's registered for highway use, it's motor fuel and that tax world. And if it's not, it would sales
Did you see the email?
I saw his.
Thanks, Scott.
Scott, Will, we very much appreciate it. Scott, thanks for sharing your witness time.
No, it's been good corresponding with Will. Will and I are coming back quite a.
Scott's glad you're here.
But it's good to have him give that depth of information because it's good for me to hear it as well. Yeah, trying to, because I get the questions in the field, so it's good for me to be able to give a concise and then a limited answer. And then once I hit my limit to know who to refer me to. Okay, finish up this. So we've licensed the devices. We've now doing SIF. We also licensed, just to kind of round out the program. We also, in Vermont, we'll call them dealer repair persons. Nationally, they're called registered service agents, RSAs. These are people that are licensed with us to go out and install and place these devices into service. And the same thing we have with small scales to truck scales to oil trucks. Basically, it's with us, it's just a fee. You get on list, you get yourself a number, so you've got a seal, so you actually can put a physical seal on the meters of these devices to make sure they're not tampered with. And then as you either install them or repair them, you send us paperwork saying this has been installed here for a new device, or this old device that's here was repaired that had what it load cell and a scale went bad, we had to replace one, something like that. Right now, we license those by the individual person. So we've got 17 people licensed for 7 businesses. And as far as we're aware, there's only 3 or 4 businesses that are they're doing the bulk of the work for installing and maintaining EVSEs in the state. All right, now to get into more of the technical stuff. This is actual error data from this year, just to kind of give you an idea of the accuracy of these devices. The important thing in this is the orange bars are your tolerance, both orange bars. Anything inside is good. Anything outside is not so good.
Bell curve.
Yeah, and again, and it does center around 0, so that is also good, right? So again, they are being calibrated most of that, and you can see this does slightly skew plus, so they do skew giving away as a whole. This is AC and DC, and the different colors are the different types of tests, right? The full load, mid range, light load tests. And then just to kind of split, this data is now split up into the DC side and the AC side. Again, AC side very much mirrors the national or the together. The DC side is more blocked, right? Not as smooth of a curve, but also much less data than the other one. So that might be an issue of that. But again, they both do skew plus versus skewing minus, which is better for the consumer.
Did I miss it?
All right, so now kind of getting into the other issues we found. So probably the biggest issue we found that of the most concern. So basically pretty close to 40% of the devices we've seen have a different number of whether it's energy delivered displayed in the screen of the device versus the screen of the app that is used to pay and finish the transaction. We haven't seen a difference big enough to make more than a difference of 1 penny in the calculation, but they should be the same. Right? They should be to the same decimals. They should just be the same, right? And so this is over 1,000, just over like 1,151 tests, right? Basically 40% of those have had a difference. It's become more symmetrical, but it is skewed slightly in the business's favor. We're not sure if that is a small data issue, if that is just a coincidence of the numbers we're using when targets we're using for testing, or if it's actually something beyond that. So again, I can't say that, but it is skewed slightly that way. You can see the amount of difference we've seen. We've seen a maximum difference of 80% difference in the positive direction and a minus 1/3 in the negative direction. The average is not that big, only like 0.3%, but that is almost more than 10% of the tolerance.
So at my gas pump, I swipe my card, and I see the amount, it's digital, I think a couple digits. in the two decimal places. The charge is based on that number that I see. It's not hidden somewhere else. But here, there's sort of a hidden, there's one you don't see and they don't quite match. That's what you're saying.
So there are occasions around. So the way the industry has explained to me on these systems, there's a front end number and a back end number. They should be, and again, I forget which one is the official one, but they all should be pulling from one of those. I don't know why there's two. It's just the way the programming is on the protocols. And so, as it was explained to me, when that happens, it means that the software is pulling from the wrong one. And again, as I said, they haven't made more than a penny difference yet, but this is something we do need to have corrected just for consumer confidence issues, right? Why am I getting these two different numbers? I think. So that's a problem. And as you can see, like the tolerance here is 2% versus a gas pump, which is 1/2 of 1%. So 4 times the tolerance here. And we've seen 20 of those that have a difference bigger than 2%. So again, is that device intolerance? Is that device out tolerance? Hard to say. Again, here are some of our miscellaneous findings, right? Networks experiencing network loss. And we've had this happen on one occasion. So if you look at this, I'll use the pointer just in case anybody's online. This here is a charge curve. Some of you that have electric vehicles will be probably a little bit more familiar with it. So this was us testing the device here in mid-afternoon. And you can see that little spike because we only test for a very short amount of time. In the middle of that test, this device had a lost network error. So basically the device turned off, the screen said network lost, and we weren't able to do anything with it. The inspector left thinking that and there's no way to actually physically turn these off. It's not like a gas pump where there's a switch when you hang up the handle that it turns it off. So as you can see, a few hours went by, and then give or take, 6 o'clock at night, 6:30 at night, somebody else plugged in to this charge that was still, and so we got billed for the $2 and it was still on us. This was an issue. We did get refunded, but this is an issue. If a gas pump had done this, this would be a very, very serious issue. We did talk to the manufacturer. They said they tried to figure out what was going on. They're pretty sure it won't happen again, but it is something that we need to be concerned about. And it does, this one thing is the example nationally for one change to the handbook, just to make sure it's very clear in the specifications that this can't happen. This is very bad. Okay, so a lot of things, again, talk about labeling, right? They do not have like all the fees listed, right? Sometimes they'll have the cost per kilowatt hour, but maybe not. That session fee is up front. And as you saw yesterday, ranging from like 50 cents to $10.50. That's got to be on the device. Doesn't have to be on the digital screen. It can be up on a paper sign or just like anything else. As long as it's posted and people can read it, that's fine. So we're having that. We're also having issues with, again, capacity of the device. So these 3 pictures down here in the corner, these are all this one, that one, and this one. So the one on top of each other here, these are the same app for the same device. Took screenshots about 5 minutes apart. One of them says this device has a maximum capacity of 75 kilowatts. One down here says it has a capacity of 25 kilowatts. This is another one by one of this brand's partners, not the same. It's not technically the brand, but they have an agreement to run each other's stuff. This one claims 100 kW. I'm pretty sure none of those 3 are accurate, but I can't say that for sure. Still, again, we're working with the developers of our testing equipment to better display some of the back end information so we can verify this better in the field.
And so I've experienced you go up and it's I don't know, certain size charger, but if there's a couple of ports, somebody hooks up in the middle of your charge, you're now getting hacked, let's say.
Yes, and those are supposed to be labeled as such, right? So typically it's been called either shared or variable delivery. And so it's supposed to say, what's the most common ones, 125 kW shared, which basically means if you're parking by yourself, the maximum you could get, if your car wants it, should be 125 kilowatts. Typically those, when 2 people plug in, the maximum you can get is give or take 62, right? It's basically divided in half. Sometimes it can be a little more, a little bit less, depending on how, again, how much the charge is coming out. So this doesn't have to deal with, this labeling isn't the actual amount that's coming out at any point, because the car and the battery can't necessarily take the full charge all the time. It's not like it's like a gas tank where you can just, the tank will take as much fuel as you can put into it through the nozzle. This, you've got to take, like, if the battery is very much drained, it can take a big charge very quickly, and then it will taper down. Typically, these curves look nice and flat like that, and then they'll kind of taper off towards the end if they're plugged in longer. So that's one thing where, again, these are the things where difference. We've started to talk to manufacturers about that. There's also the handbooks that we enforce have. The two different handbooks have a different set of labeling requirements. So that's, again, one of the things that we need to standardize nationally. So we have a very good set of rules to say, yeah, you need to comply with these labeling.
And so you're saying based on the rules now, the label has to, tell you what it can produce.
Yeah, like the way our interpretation of the labels, when it says maximum, like the maximum output should be what its maximum capability is, right? You just install it so many volts and so many amps, you do the math, you get so many kilowatts, right? And that's not what the car can take. That is what the device can put out. Going forward, 2026, just kind of our inspection priorities, right? This last year was kind of a nice friendly year. Again, we're doing a lot of talking, a lot of asking. I've got a lot of people's phone numbers. Most people have my phone number. Hopefully a lot of that stuff has been corrected. This year, it's gonna, like, again, we're kind of gonna take one step from the ladder. Right now, more of those gray devices that we had last year, if they weren't passed or failed, will either get approved or the ones that were corrected will get approved. The ones that will not will be getting rejected. They'll have an extended timeline to fix, either 3 to 6 months or something like that. But there's going to be, we're now heading into the more normal, slowly tightening things in to try to get things as by the book as we can. There's still going to be some legacy devices that maybe will be exempt from some of the requirements just because they were put in before the requirements were out, or it's like, is it really worth closing a device that somebody invested time and money into for other things, not the important stuff, but for minor things.
And I think legally, there's a question whether you can, somebody puts in a device and then you have new regulations or something to it.
Yeah, and that's why all of our regulations there are some that are retroactive and some that are non-retroactive. So some of the requirements are just requirements. But again, having the same numbers of decimal places on your receipt as you have on the screen and having them match, that is not a non-retroactive. If you don't have that, you're not going to operate. But there's other things like marking requirements. Did you have, like, in our case, Vermont was one of the very last states to become an NTEP state. Basically, that's the standard we use to say a device is legal for trade or not. So the devices that were put in before that, there's no problem because we didn't have the requirements. The devices afterwards are going to have to comply with that. And sometimes that's a manufacturer going back to get certified. Sometimes that's changing out a device. There, in fact, I think one company that put a few in this year, they're planning on just changing all their devices out to their newer device that will be NTEPs here soon, probably sometime in 2026. Again, we're going to work towards, getting 100% licensed of what we're, available to public, also not owned by public utility right now. Once we get clarification around that, we'll make sure we get that sorted. Because right now, public utilities won't have to license with us, but all of the private owners will. Owns, operators, and commercial devices. So that's some legislative, but we will get out and we'll talk to more people. We'll follow up on the people that didn't license this year that we did talk to, but that's just the process. It's the same with all devices.
How do we know how much electricity is being sold? How do we know how much is being collected? How do we know how much funds are being raised in this new market of selling electricity for electric vehicles?
As a whole or for each charger?
Well, I guess that's interesting. How are we going to measure the amount? Well, again, I'm thinking of from transportation fund, money that we're not getting to help fix the roads. But how do we know that this industry that's growing of selling electricity, how does it at any way gets priced off from all the electricity that goes on in the state?
I can, on a device by device case, they have totalizers that keep track of how much those devices dispense over time. So again, if you were tracking that, I think the tax department did share some sample data.
Required to report this in some, they must be in order
for tax.
So that's by dollars. I guess, or not, I don't know.
So, do they report to you guys on any of that?
Any sales tax vendor reports to the tax department on total sales and the tax collected. So not the amount of electricity or the number of pencils sold or the number of televisions sold, but just the sales.
Sure know the number of gallons of gas, but we don't know the kilowatts of electricity, do it, in a comparison world, I guess is what you're saying. I don't mean to sound like
I
that's
don't
bad,
know.
I'm just saying.
What's for agency of transportation, I don't know exactly what they collect from the motor fuels. So that's collected by the tax department.
I do know that they know every gallon that comes in to the state, and but I'm just looking at that piece of saying, how do we just saw some testimony this week of an incredibly new, beautiful station that had a huge new section of electric charging, and there's a significant amount of activity going on, and we won't have any idea what we're missing out on for the roads potentially, or not, I guess is a question. Or maybe I'm not looking at it the right
Well,
way, but if that is your.
That sales tax is not going to,
Right, and we don't know if it's growing, we don't know if it's a growing business, I don't know how the business is measured in that way. Like you for things that are impacting the roads on the gas and diesel tax. I'm not sure that we would have any idea what this growing market is, and how do we know, on top of that, it is your goal to have every non-public utility owned, you will know and be registered in every piece. And that fee is gonna go to pay for your administering of the program, not to help which is why I'm on my usage fee. Go ahead, say me, Representative.
a couple of questions. I'll do one just while we have a tax expert here. So we have a category of public charger, selling to the public. Clearly, somebody's paying money for the electricity, should be paying 6% sales tax, which goes to normal sales tax. And then you have mine at home, not subject to sales tax, not subject to any of your requirements. You don't care whether it's labeled or whatever. Now I have a condo association. They put in 4 chargers, and they might do one of 2 things. They could not charge for electricity. So I'm assuming if they don't charge for electricity, then the tax department's not involved and you're not involved. But if they do, we're gonna put in 4 chargers, charge point, level 2s, and you're gonna swipe your card or your charge point thing to charge your car. Then sales tax should be applied because you're paying the condo association for the electricity, I guess. And your regulations might also apply.
Method of sale would apply. Those will be a lower, as of right now, they're a low enforcement priority, right? Because the intent is not for the general public. The intent is.
That's right.
Those
Like a club,
Yeah.
right? You belong to the
Small
club.
little club, like show me, as long as like you said, you can say, if I can ask you, show me the list of people that are supposed to be using this, and you can say here. Or it's the tenants of even like these 3 townhouses.
So I think what we haven't done as a legislature, or a state, is sort of clearly define, we kind of know if it's sold to the public, we have the rules. And if it's to private, we have the rules, but we might need to define sort of this in-between space of, apartment owned or, business companies that own it, whether they charge or not, and what the requirements are. Would we say that's a kind of a gray area?
Could I just add to that, to your comments, please, Mark Puckett with the Agency of Agriculture Weights and Measures, and currently it is in discussion with Scott and I, Steve, our legal staff, and so on and so forth. But our current licensing does tie us into the Public Service Board's definition of what electric vehicle supply equipment is and commercial and all of that. And that is 30 VSA 201. You folks are welcome to look at that. There is some language there. It's fairly definitive and, you know, on our wish list, very respectfully for us to deal with the Public Service Board might be 4 weights and measures to decouple from that language, as Weights and Measures has clearly defined definitions for what commercial weighing and measuring devices are. And if some of the items that you bring up are in this definition for the Public Service Board, and it does appear to me to limit some activity that could take place at a place such as a condominium or so on and so forth.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Just one thing I would add is, also missing from the puzzle is, other exempt entities. So we've been talking about residential property, but there are other exemptions from the sales tax as well. There are 3 kinds. There's a product-based exemption. Those are like for pharmaceutical drugs, no matter who buys them for whatever purpose they exempt. There's use-based exemptions like electricity for house. And then there's entity-based exemptions. So in addition to home use, other exempt users, so exempt from sales tax will be government entities, instrumentalities of the state, et cetera. So, you know, if a Vermont college puts in a charger, whether or not they're charging for the electricity or just for their own fleet, you know, that wouldn't be captured in anything that the tax department does.
And I guess my takeaway from your presentation, which I totally appreciate, is that Weights and Measures is moving forward. You bought the equipment. Now you're moving forward. And generally, as you speak to all these different vendors, you know, you're helping them understand, hey, here are the requirements. And pretty much, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of the people, the vendors, the people who are selling this, you know, sort of are getting in line. Because they must be for other states too, I would guess.
Yeah, you kind of asked yesterday at the beginning, Vermont is, it's basically us in California that are ahead of everybody. I think California has been done by counties. Yes, for the most part, I'd say most everybody is like slowly complying. Some people are more reluctant. I have had one company that's basically told me to go pound sand, so we'll deal with them this year. But other than that, it's been pretty good.
Can I just add to Scott's comments? First of all, I want to commend Scott and my staff for the work they've done. I know I came in here 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, and like you said, this was the wild, wild west, and it truly was. And we had lots of regulations that we adopt by reference in this handbook 44, and it's been a lot of work to get this program off the ground. Then now we have the equipment and we have some results. I think I said a couple of years ago, we need to get boots on the ground and get out there and see what we find for equipment, and we're doing that, and we're finding that. And also that with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, if you look at it nationally, we're very transparent and we're sharing our results around the country. And we're getting a lot of feedback and buy-in, and we're actually giving a lot of guidance to jurisdictions who are just getting going also. And a shout out to Scott and his crew. I speak with people all over the country, and I'm aware of some states that they spend a lot of money on the testing equipment, and it's come into their laboratories and has sat there for 2 years. And we got our DC testing equipment on it was a year ago in July on Monday morning. It was Monday morning, and Wednesday afternoon, it was on Scott's pickup truck, and we were doing DC testing. It was less than 72 hours, and we have the results, and we're doing soft compliance enforcement work. We will continue the educational component of this and move forward, and we're happy to keep you folks, anyone informed on an ongoing basis at any time. And again, our wish list at some point in time, very respectfully to the Public Service Board, our wish list would be to decouple from their definition in 30 PSA 201. That would streamline things and make our work more easier, because we already have a clear definition of what commercial weighing and measuring devices are.
Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
The second day and an extra piece. Thank you very much for joining us and clarifying a lot of pieces, and we will, but certainly be